All right, so we'll call this policy subcommittee meeting to order, March 2nd, 2 o'clock. There's Cliff. Any public comments? I see no one, so let's move on. So the first item on the agenda came out of the MASC notice that came out to check policies, any policies related to these items in preparation for the coronavirus. And I didn't know what they all meant. I was hoping that you might be able to
No, I
backfill
know
us.
what they meant. I said, Christy, send these to the principals, please, because maybe someone knows something I don't know.
And they all said, no idea.
The only thing I can think of, and it's probably, obviously it's not called that, but we don't call it that, but when we were going to do the blizzard bags, remember that?
Yeah.
That would have been the only thing that I would think would come close to the idea of being able to continue school while we're not here.
Yeah.
But the more I think about it, that only would work, or that only did work because the commissioner said that it would work. As soon as he said, well, we're not going to give you credit for that anymore, then whether we had it or not, would have given us credit for it. So
I forgot that. He said, no credit if you're doing school away from school.
for anybody, just did away with them. So that would have, anybody who had those would have been able to continue school if in the event you had to close the school for something other than, snowstorm. That being the case, even if we put something like that in place,
Yeah.
you would first need something from the commissioner that said you would get credit for
Right.
that, because it would just be like calling a snow day and say, do this,
Right.
and
Yeah.
no credit.
Right.
So I think part of the plan any kind of plan would have to also rely on the commissioner saying you should have a plan
With credit.
with credit, or else, what difference would it make?
So,
You'd have to come back and make the days up anyway.
okay, yes,
You know what I mean?
I agree.
So-
So do we know if anyone's had that conversation with the department?
I haven't seen anything from the department. So, I think
It's so funny because this is what they're talking about, continuity of operations.
but that's from the MASC, right?
Yeah,
would that
review the school
presuppose that-
district's continuity of operations plan and business continuity plans, which outline procedures for continued function during an extended emergency.
Yeah,
And who's
the
in
more I thought
charge?
about it, like I said, the only thing I could think of that would even come close to that would have been, these emergency, or the, old, what they called the blizzard bags. I can't think of anything that,
Well, what's going
Ever
on in
been done.
Natick? Natick just told these students who came back from Italy not to come in. Did you
Right.
see that?
Yep, I did.
well,
And I
my
wondered,
guess
like-
is an excused absence. That if I just gave them an excused absence, because school's still going on, so they probably get some assignments to do.
And they had
Where's the
credit?
policy subcommittee for
Yeah.
Completing the
Or, what it says, like, if we have a
It's
long-term
right
suspension,
next
or
to the regular
if a
one.
student who's hospitalized. or
In the
something,
drive.
We provide tutoring, we provide assignments so that they don't lose, because it's not their fault, something like
Right.
that happens. But that's only on a small scale. We're talking about closing the school system. I know what I would do. I would consult with the Department of Ed, and I would consult with the Department of Public Health to see, what should I do next? That wouldn't be a decision I would make, because it affects every kid in the school and affects the town.
So, how do you think we ought to follow up on this? Do you think we ought to contact MASC? Do you think
I
someone
would
here
think
should
so.
call the
Nobody I've
department?
talked to seems to know what that is, or has even heard of it.
So, contact MASC.
Yeah, ask if there's someone who has them, and then at least, we can contact them and say, what is this you have? On the superintendent's listserv the other day, there was a discussion about sending letters out. We had sent a letter out the other day on Friday. I saw nothing about that. I saw stuff about methods of disinfecting the school.
Right.
I shared some information about what we do, because we use the electrostatic method,
Yep.
but nothing about that. So I have no, did you ever have stuff like that when you were principal?
In regards to what, say,
If you had an issue where schools closed down for a long period of time, like a month, was there a plan in place for how to get, what happened? Because I would think it had to be coordinated with the Department of Ed. There's no way you're just gonna.
I would assume that
Yeah.
as well. I'm trying to think. No, my only experience was when I was opening a new school in Holden, and it was not ready for the beginning of school. We opened 2 weeks later than everyone else in the school district. And there was a plan, but I think that was a plan that was devised specifically in response to an emergency, like we weren't going to be able to open the building.
Right.
And
Well, I'm sure somebody called the Department of Ed and said, we can't open.
right.
Right.
And we actually did have to, we had missed like 10 days of school. And we got a waiver, and we only had to go 5 days longer than the rest of the school system.
That I've heard of, that kind of stuff. 'Cause
Well,
it happened,
that was fun.
that happened the first year I was here with, some of the districts had a lot of snow days.
Yeah.
Snow days that would have put them into July. So they worked something out. We only had 7. But I don't know, I have no idea. But
So, Cliff, I'll contact MAS Dorothy, or?
Yeah, who would we ask? Where they're so specific about naming those two policies.
Yeah, this came right out of their
It's like
document.
they must exist.
they must exist because they have a very
But-
specific name, you're
but-
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would think Dorothy would be a beginning point
Okay.
to ask about that.
yeah,
And if she
Okay.
doesn't know, she might direct us to where to look for that. And yeah, she's a good first point.
okay. All right, so we will, I'll follow up and let you know what she says. And then also with that was personnel human resource policies having to do with absenteeism, leave,
Yeah.
right? So if people, I guess this is referring to if people, let's say staff is sick,
Yeah.
MASC probably has models, wouldn't you think?
you think?
Because they're usually good about that sort of thing. Because when they write model policy, I mean, they run it through lawyers and
Right.
and government regulators and
So you haven't seen anything like this coming through MASS?
No.
Okay,
Have you seen anything, Kristen?
Nope, nothing.
all
I'm sure
right,
she gets all the stuff I get.
all right, so next step is
And the
for me to
principals
contact
haven't.
MASC. Okay. So I think it's something to be aware of, I guess. So, I'm watching Natick and thinking, okay, they're keeping a whole load of kids out. I don't know for how long. I didn't see notice for how long they're keeping
How many kids do you know,
students
did they
out.
say?
No, but it
no,
was
they
like
did not
group-
say how many. I thought they said they told them a week and that they would reevaluate in a week.
Okay.
And they didn't say anything about whether they were being monitored.
Homework,
Nothing.
any expectations?
The news report was simply that they told them they were not to come to school.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'll get back to you on that. I'm a little, I'm watchful of all this, because this kind of thing can hit, especially with Natick kids coming back. I was feeling like, okay, now we're getting close.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, that
this
is a
stuff
little
can sweep in pretty quickly. Or, same as a regular flu can
Yeah.
wipe out high numbers of kids. And I think one of the questions is somebody monitoring the trends in absenteeism, and is there a threshold at which some other decision has to be made about how education's delivered?
I think we only close schools here one time. I think Berlin was closed.
Yeah, it was since I've been on the school
That was
committee.
before me, right? Yeah.
Because of a flu?
Because of the flu, high absenteeism.
And it was closed for how long? Remember?
Good question. A
Oh,
few
right
days
before,
perhaps.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
John would know, because John was the principal.
Yeah, because he reminded me of that. When I was asking him about this stuff, and he goes, I remember it was closed down.
I don't remember how many days.
So
It wasn't
most-
like a week or 2 weeks.
Okay,
Like
it was
it
under a
was.
And I don't think there obviously wasn't a plan. It was just, there was high absenteeism, and I feel that this was gonna not get better before it got worse, so
Right.
it closed the schools.
You might revisit that with
Yeah.
them, just to find out, like, what was the tipping point on that decision? Was there homework accommodation, expectation?
Yeah.
How did you know, why a few days? What did you expect to happen by closing for a few days?
Yeah.
Did it remedy,
I don't think
give
he
enough
closed,
space
I
to?
don't think he closed, I think the superintendent closed it, but he'll probably know what the thinking was behind it.
Yeah,
so-
and just, was that adequate time
We'll
to break
we'll check with
for
him.
3 days, or,
It was Newton North, and there was 19 students.
Oh, Newton.
Yeah.
This was Natick, wasn't it?
No, Newton.
Oh,
Newton,
okay, my mistake.
they required students and staff from Newton North High School who returned from Italy on February 29th to stay home beginning Monday. They would remain home until further notice. These students and staff will return to school once we have been advised that it is appropriate. They were traveling in an area identified as a hot spot for the virus in Italy.
Yeah, they were in Italy.
So this, the self-quarantine,
Yeah,
which is what they're.
and they're doing
wide
this out of an
open
abundance of
timeline.
caution.
Yeah, and there were two
That's
other
it.
schools that were mentioned in the same report.
Hopedale and Milford, I was
Oh.
Googling.
And I know Kearsarge in southern New Hampshire did it too.
Well, because we had February break in there, right?
Yeah, Milford and Hopedale students, 22 students came home Friday of vacation week and were asked to stay home.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, I'll ask Dorothy some questions, who's monitoring? What are the policies that are driving
Yeah.
that
Could
work?
you just make a note to, we'll ask John, if there was a tipping point someplace,
So did you indicate that you had reached out to some of your fellow superintendents and to ask them if they had?
No, it came up on a listserv the other day. Someone had asked about letters that were sent, or if anybody was gonna send it. It was just because there's been some questions in the community, and we were getting ready to send one. But then, some of the other, then the thread just started going from there.
Okay.
And there was some stuff about, how do you disinfect the school, and I actually had I found a video of this, the same backpack sprays that we use, they were using in China. They were actually spraying people, with the disinfectant as they were coming down the stairway.
God, that's creepy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty safe disinfectant, but still, to be
Yeah,
spraying.
Yeah, it's
you
one
with
thing
the-
to put it on an inanimate surface.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go over that in school committee meeting. We've taken some extra precautions just to make sure, because even in rooms where kids aren't supposed to eat in the class, and sometimes they do.
and also I saw something about totally downplaying your attendance awards and stuff, because you don't want to encourage people to come to school if they're sick at all.
Yeah,
So if there are recognitions for that kind of thing, you may have to, revisit that kind of practice. There are lots of little things like this, right?
because some of those kids who were up for the perfect attendance, they'll come
Right,
and drag themselves in.
that's, you have to kind of not count this period or something.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Jamie had it 3 years in a row, and she wanted that keychain so bad.
Oh, I know,
Yeah,
yeah.
She
No,
could have been
they
on
do
death's
that.
door, and she wanted to get that keychain.
Well, I
I said,
think
I'll buy you a
you're gonna-
keychain. It's
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
Kind of
great
thing that
honor, I
will
mean,
Bring kids in, and I think you need to think carefully about that. All right, so we have a next step on that. Let's move on. Are we okay? You
Yep.
ready to move forward?
Yeah.
So we should get Karen in here because she wants to talk to us about several
there we go.
policies.
Yes, she does.
I assume these are to do with the review, maybe?
Yes, the
Yeah.
coordinated program review or tiered focused
Yes.
Oh,
monitoring.
yes, which the
Yes.
city of Boston's going through.
Oh,
And
fun.
they're totally freaked out.
Oh, I can't
Did you see that the
imagine.
city of Boston Public Schools posted 800 jobs on School Spring?
Oh, my
The
gosh.
like entire staff of Boston Public Schools, their jobs were posted. So somebody hit a wrong button, I think.
Sorry, Karen.
Sorry to make you
I
move. So,
800 jobs.
or they're cleaning house, one or the other.
Am I right in your face, Jan?
I hope you styled the back of your head.
My best side.
It's bound to be more attractive than my bald spot.
You all set for me?
Yes,
All right, so here, I
thank you.
tried to get these a little organized. So I'm doing the, did I? Sorry, I didn't mean to miss you, Jeff. That's yours. So the CPR, we had a couple that we're checking. We have to do the civil rights piece as well, and so that's what Christy and the principals have been kind of helping me get through. So we crossed out a couple, we put them on there. We realized as we went through that some of the things could be addressed in procedures, so we don't need to change the policy for them.
Okay.
And we do have some procedures, so, but we wanted them on here so we could talk about them if we needed to. So we cut it down a little bit. So the first one's restraint procedures, JKAA. And right behind that, the first one is our current policy. And I put in red what I think, something similar to that we might need to add to it. And behind that one is the MASC restraint policy, and you can see it's just what I cut and paste was just from MASC. What the state is asking is if we have as part of our policy methods of preventing student violence and self-injurious behavior, and we didn't really have a statement in there. So I took it from MASC, stuck it in there where I thought it would go. It's basically that the superintendent creates all of these procedures, but that we've mentioned in the policy that we do have procedures. Does that make sense?
Do we have procedures?
We do have procedures on a lot of this. We do have a lot of crisis planning that's taken place. We have written crisis plans, as well as doing planning with the police and the fire departments and all of that. The methods of preventing student violence, I think we could do some more work around putting some procedures in place on that. I don't think we have like written procedures on that.
So our policy requires that the superintendent develop those procedures. Is that, I see it comes directly from the MASC policy. Is that a new section in the MASC
It was
policy?
added since, there's been a couple of these. We did the physical restraint, I don't know what year it was we did this, several years back. And we also did the procedures at that time, 2017. So they have updated it and kind of added the student violence and the suicide was added to it.
Additional categories based on the reality of the school spirit. Got it.
More concerning areas. And so we do have a procedure document. I could have printed that out for you too.
That's okay, we don't review those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there are procedures in it, but it may be something that we want to look at and talk about some of those too.
So everything else in their policy is included in ours?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
I think it may be worded slightly differently, but it seems like everything else is in there. I have a checklist that they give us for civil rights. We have to make sure we have all of these topics covered, and that was the only
sure.
thing I found missing.
okay.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
that seems reasonable to
Does seem
send
reasonable.
Give
forward.
you a chance to take a look at that. You want to look at the next one?
Does that sit well with you, Jeff?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay, yep.
So the next one was the homeless students. So there's a couple of things. The biggest was that this law changed, and I've spoken to you a couple times about the changes in taking foster care out of the homeless, and it's had some impact on us as a district. But it's still in our policy, the number 5, awaiting foster care. So that was really what needs to come out of it. And then as I was reviewing the MASC one behind it, there was more. I highlighted those in yellow. The dispute resolution, I highlighted because we really don't address that in this policy. And I'm thinking maybe we should. The homeless liaison, they have a whole paragraph, and we actually have that in there in like one sentence that says, let me see if I can find that sentence.
Yeah, that's right.
It says we have one, basically.
Should
Yeah.
designate an appropriate staff member.
And that may
Brings
be
it over to
fine. As I read through the whole section on homeless liaison, I didn't feel like it was more procedural of what that person does. I wasn't sure whether we really needed that, but I highlighted it so you could take a look at it since you're looking at the policy.
So John, we're taking out the waiting foster care placement?
Yes. That should come out.
And you're saying that was because it's included in a different policy? Or the foster care?
Foster care is no longer part of homeless. It's a separate category. It's
Is
no
it-
longer considered a homeless child like it used to be.
But is foster care addressed in a different policy?
Yes, this is foster care, which we did, right? Did we? It's a recent one.
It's the one I just sent you this morning
Right.
that Russ is reviewing.
Right, so I think you already have looked at that earlier in the year.
So is that still in
It's still in
flux?
review,
Still in
yeah.
review, okay.
There was some question about whether or not the law was just the policy was just a reiteration of
Oh, right.
the law. So
Yes,
Russ is
that's
gonna
right. That's right.
take a look and give us some advice on that.
And we're adding the dispute resolution language.
I think the dispute resolution should be in there.
Yeah, I
Whether you
agree.
feel like
No, I
the
agree. I
stuff.
just want to make sure that's what we get.
Yeah, the part about the homeless liaison, I don't know that all of that wording needs to be in there, but maybe you feel like it's important, so I just put it in there to show you.
I think dispute resolution language is.
That is, yes.
needs to be there.
Yeah, and I see in the MASC policy, they have a heading, homeless liaison.
Mm-hmm.
Should we stick that in there? So it's just easier to navigate the policy?
You want to compare the two?
No, I'm just wondering if we should have a heading in there above it.
Oh, that's like a formatting question. Like where we have dispute resolution as a heading.
I guess it's not the way it's set up, because it's at the top, that would necessitate other headings below it, so I guess maybe we don't go into
I think, the way they did it, they put one sentence in, so there's not much else to go there. But yeah, if you put the paragraph in, you might want to do that.
But then you'd have to have a different heading underneath that.
I agree that the homeless language sounds like a procedure to me rather than a policy.
This language here,
Yeah.
About the liaison.
about what that person.
What that person
should
does. Almost sounds like a job description.
It does
in
sound
many
like a
ways.
job description, yeah.
And it's certainly what we do, but I didn't know if it was necessary.
So do we have in place a written job description or procedure?
I don't think so. It's part of my job.
Oh.
I don't think so. Comes under the and all other duties at the end.
Yeah, right.
We could add it as an exhibit if you want, that language. GFABD-E and put just, we could do that if you want to take it out of here. That is a little procedural and sounds like it. So if you wanted to take it out, but you still want to keep it around,
Well, I think the other way to go at it is to keep the first long list of, okay, this is what we mean by coordination, and take out the rest of it. From this coordination includes providing public notice down to the end, because that's even more specific.
So say that again, Susan, starting with this coordination.
Yeah, just delete from there down and keep the general description of, okay, this is what we mean by a liaison. They do these things, but then from this coordination
Oh, so
down
for the
is even
definition.
more specific. It seems, but maybe not, I don't know. I don't know. I think it doesn't hurt to have a description of what the liaison does in here.
I don't think in this case it does.
Hurt to have it there.
No.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
because these are the kind of things that'll get you in trouble,
Yeah. I
you
think,
know, if you're not a little more specific about them.
yeah.
Are you all right with it being in there?
Oh, I'm fine, whichever way you want to go with it.
Yeah, no, I don't.
And Karen, why is the preschool programs in yellow?
Oh, that is a question. I'm very self-serving with this one. It's not, I don't know if it's a policy question. So, part of our program says that it includes preschool programs. We have in the past, we don't have anybody now, homeless children who come in and aren't eligible for our paid preschool. Back years and years ago, we had a voucher system through the state, and that would kind of take care of their payment. We don't have a plan for these kiddos and a way to bring them in. And certainly our homeless preschoolers, we would love to have in the preschool if there's an opening. Obviously, you know, mid-year, a lot of them, there's no openings. But I just wondered if maybe that was something that you wanted to address a little bit.
I like having them in there, because I think, for me, I think you earlier, because oftentimes they stay. I mean, we get 80% of our kids who go on to K. So the earlier you can get a hold of students and start working with them, I think it's better for the district, it's better for the student. If they can, you know, if they can be fit into the program, I think it benefits everybody.
And these are certainly students that can benefit from a little extra structure and
Yeah.
support.
And like I said, with 80% of them, roughly, that's been historically in this district, that's what it is. It benefits the district too.
I think I'd love to see something that says if slots are available, that they would be offered to them free of charge because everybody else pays, but I don't know if there's any legal concern about that.
Yeah, right. Because there might be other students who might also be eligible that way, potentially.
Karen, do you know under the homeless statute, if the homeless students are given any other monetary benefits?
They get free lunch,
Free lunch, yeah, besides
yeah,
that?
and transportation.
Yeah. You know, I know we have budget issues, but I don't see where that would be a bad thing to add in. I really don't.
Free of charge, that part?
Yeah. I mean, given that under the statute, they're provided all this other stuff because they are homeless.
But the statute doesn't include preschool. Is
Not that I
correct?
know, there's nothing
No,
in
it
there
does
that
not.
says that.
It does not.
This just says they're available comparable preschool programs.
You know, I'm just
which would
thinking,
be paid.
I just think about the long-range piece of this. For the student, but also for the district.
Can the policy make the decision? Can the superintendent make the decision about whether or not a homeless child should be offered free preschool?
Seems like
It's a good
it's more of
question.
a policy position. Do we support that as a policy?
Yes, that's what I meant. Would that be a way
I think
to open the door? I don't know.
Are there other students? I mean, what about the foster care students? What about some special needs students? Or, I mean, could people say, well, why does that group of students get free access to these programs?
so. Foster care students can participate in the paid preschool as well as anybody else, but we don't tend to get foster children in preschool. The foster kiddos that we have in preschool seem to be ours that have now been taken out of the home while they're in preschool. So we haven't had them coming in the other way. So it's a good question. It certainly could happen.
I just wondered if there would be, if this would be something you'd want to pass by Russ to see.
Oh, yeah, definitely,
This
yeah.
is,
Yeah.
can we do it this way?
Right, absolutely.
We've just had occasionally a student who we had the older sibling was homeless, and we would have really loved to bring that that homeless child into the preschool and give them some support, and we just really haven't had a mechanism to do it. So that's all I'm asking, is that we look at it, I guess, and see if there's a way to do it. Generally, the school year starts and the preschools are Foyleton, especially Berlin, has a little more space right now. It tends to go back and forth with that. So if a Boylston child came in, there wouldn't be a slot for him. But if a Berlin child came in and we had slots, it would be nice to be able to offer it at that point.
Okay, so we're in agreement with the red edits, correct?
Yes, I'm in
And-
agreement.
And so we just have a question about whether we can build in language that says free slots, if available, these students can slide in. So this would need to go to Russ. And who takes it to Russ? Christie, okay.
Would just adding a word like comparable available preschool programs help? Because if there are no slots, then there are no slots. If there is a slot, it might not be in the same town.
Right. But rather than have it sit there empty,
Yes,
it would be nice to fill it.
yes.
I think it's a
Okay.
great question to go to Russ and just make sure we're on
Yeah.
solid footing.
No, I agree.
So what do you want me to ask him, if we can put comparable available preschool programs and then put free of charge? Or,
I mean, that's what
Anyone-
we're,
That's
Well,
really
first of
what
all,
we're asking
preschool
for.
fits in there, that, this homeless piece, and then if it does, can we offer it free charge, free of charge? So it's really kind of
It's two
two questions.
questions.
Yeah,
Yeah. We can always play with the wording,
like it,
but
though.
really,
okay.
if this gets reviewed again at the next meeting, does that suit your timeline okay? Or do you need it
does.
done like now? Because we could
make the-
send it forward with the
I
red
was gonna say we could
edits.
just make the changes and then we can bring it back to add the preschool part.
we have to submit to the state our civil rights by June 1st, I believe it is, June
Okay.
1st. Is that
We should be
enough
able
of
to
a
do
time
that,
frame? Okay.
unless you want to move this along.
No, as long as we can do it, I'd rather you only do it once and you don't have
Okay.
to do it
All right.
twice.
So that'll go for a first read in April. It won't get voted on until May 22nd. May 19th, because that May meeting's late. If that's all right with your
Yeah,
timeline.
but
Okay.
you're good, you'll get it right to me,
Yep.
so we'll get them loaded up there. Okay, sounds good.
He actually did answer me about the foster care, just while we were sitting
What did
here.
you say about
He suggests adopting the MASC policy.
for foster care?
Yep. There's
With
no
all
good
the
way to
words?
simplify it,
No?
even though their
Okay.
policy mirrors the suggested. The language in the law, it contains relevant information pertaining to students in foster care, would not suggest taking any of the information out.
There's an answer.
Foster care policy.
That's not on the agenda at this time, it was
That
on a
was
previous
follow-up
agenda,
from
but that was a
Do
follow-up.
we need to, do we want to do that right now? And wrap that up? Because that means that still has to go to committee, right?
That would be
Yeah.
great. That makes
Yep.
it go to the committee.
Right, let's insert
So we need
this
that one
from
too, for civil rights.
Yeah.
I forget what policy number that was. So he's saying,
He's-
keep the language
He's saying
as
keep it as
MASC.
as MASC recommended it. And I believe that was back in the June policy meeting. It was with the military children policy.
oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
well, that was a while ago.
Yeah, he recommends,
Remember
I
what
think,
question?
yeah, I think it fell through the cracks, but he recommends adopting it as stated by MASC.
And it's not on this list at all of policies that MASC is saying to review, right?
Not the latest one, I think it was before that.
Okay, so we already discussed that, and we had just that, we had a particular question we were asking him, but, so we're just back to the MASC.
MASC,
Do
yeah.
you need to see it again? Are we okay sending it forward?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. You don't remember the letter of
It's
that?
JFAB E or JFAB E, D? JFAB E or D? It'll be in the packet from the June meeting.
What's
I
that?
wasn't Ginny.
Thanks.
Okay, you were not.
Thanks.
And,
Thanks, Karen.
Ryan.
Thank you, Karen.
It's JFAB D or E.
Educational opportunities for military children.
And then the ones for, then foster care should be right before or after it.
Homeless. Special ed. I'm not seeing it.
Bernie would like free preschool for all. I think I'm starting to channel him.
Yeah, right.
Free preschool for all. So, right.
Should we call you Bernie now?
Coming to Bernie, bro.
I don't know where the foster care one is.
Preschool for all. Is it
Homeless.
human? Right.
Maybe, is it folded into the homeless one?
I don't think so. Let me see if I can.
It doesn't come up when I search for foster care. Waiting, no, that's this. All right, I'm gonna leave that to you. to
Okay, I will,
sleuth down.
I will find it. I will send you all a copy of it.
Okay. All right, so, just look back here. This one was taken off the list. Student discipline was off the list. We did restraint. Homeless. Legacy field trips. Okay, we're ready for legacy field trips. All right, so you got feedback from union response to the draft? And I'm wondering, did you talk with anyone? First of all, did you speak with anyone, or was this just paper exchange?
No, that's just a paper exchange. We did talk to the leadership. Do you have the notes from the leadership?
I don't,
On the,
I don't have it on me, but I see, I have it in here. Administrative leadership notes.
Were there any other conversations besides with the union for the admin or anything?
See, I have the notes from the admin meeting.
leadership.
Oh,
So,
that's what you're looking
yeah,
for.
Yeah.
That's what she's looking
Okay,
for.
sorry.
So I sent that to leadership saying, here's the policy, here's what the association, that's their feedback. And so we took it up at the meeting.
Okay,
Just to get their feedback on it.
okay, so
Do you want-
Cliff,
do
you
you have
might
it?
want to
Yep.
just scan that in the drive there.
Yep, I finally found the drive.
The notes from the leadership meeting. After careful thoughts, the leadership team strongly feels that this should not be an addendum to policy IJOA, citing numerous comments from the association.
It shouldn't be an addendum because of what the association has said.
They agreed with a lot of that stuff a lot of the stuff the association had said.
Well, I saw some very concrete, a couple of concrete things, like, taking out the word legitimately, it looks like,
Yeah.
the committee recognized teachers.
I think overall, the feeling was that what would happen would be, the teachers it would discourage teachers from, wanting to do this anymore, that it was creating too much, paperwork around these field trips. And the principals agreed with that. They believe the same thing, that somewhere along the line, this is gonna discourage teachers from, and I think they say it here too, I'm looking for it.
It discourages teachers from
Yeah.
planning elaborate trips.
Yeah.
And it may discourage teachers from letting such trips last into the magical age
Yeah, that was
year.
the other thing, that they thought, like, if they had a trip they had been doing and they weren't completely sure about it, that they might cut it off
Yep,
before it got to the 8th year to avoid that
right,
piece.
that they weren't sure about, a trip they weren't sure about.
Yeah,
What does that mean?
well, I mean, I think that if it got to the point where, maybe they didn't have the attendance, or, something like that, or it was just one of those kind of field trips. I guess you could make an argument that if that's the case, then it shouldn't be a legacy field
Right,
trip,
I mean,
right? So,
I think that there's the idea of an 8th year, something changes in the 8th year, should prompt an assessment. Is this a trip that we think, has held up the test of time, has earned a place in the curriculum, and that the community should come to expect to happen because it's really proved its worth,
yeah,
or not? By that time, by 8 years, you've gone, that's quite a while. And you'd think that either the trip would be dipping in some way, or the curriculum's changed, or something like that, or this trip has sort of proven its worth.
yeah. No, I understand, but I also, I know from the point of view what they're saying, you do this field trip, and then in addition to that, you have to conduct surveys and collect all this other data, and,
Well, here's my thoughts about that. First of all, the policy doesn't say that. The draft.
well, the addendum, oh, yeah, you mean yours, the one, the Addendum New Role.
Right, the draft says, the superintendent shall establish district procedures to ensure schools pursue a planful timeline for change that engages students and families early in the process of learning about why changes are being considered and ensures opportunity for responding or contributing to possible changes. To support these conversations, it may benefit schools to collect some data to support whatever they want to set forth as why changes are taking place. So it would be helpful if school, and I actually think the schools could facilitate that without a lot of trouble. Teachers are collecting a lot of this data anyway, it's just not systematized. And it says it may benefit them to track field trip data over time, such as. Those are all suggestions of the kind of data that could be helpful in talking with parents about why a trip may change. The attendance has changed, the cost has changed, the curriculum has changed, the transportation needs have changed. These are things that in many ways schools should be tracking anyway, particularly with staffing changes and not having any sort of historical knowledge around a trip that runs this long.
I think they do, but I don't think it's ever been done. I mean, I can't think any teacher I know has ever tracked that kind of stuff
Well, they've
officially,
collected
you know what I
it,
mean?
but a lot of times they'll like give a little survey or solicit feedback after an experience like that, and they stuff it in a folder somewhere.
Yeah,
Right? They think about it for that year, that group of teachers, and that's it.
yeah,
Whereas it would be helpful for these long-standing field trips to have data that says whatever, for for 8 years, parents, families have said nothing but glowing things about this trip. Or there's been this one issue that's persisted over several years that's giving us pause about whether this trip should continue. So my point here is that the policy says, it doesn't say they have to do any of that. They're saying what it's advocating is that the superintendent establish procedures to ensure schools pursue a planful timeline for change and engage parents in understanding why and give them the opportunity to give input. And, you know, this is reflected in policy we have anyway, which has not been sort of voiced here, but there is a policy on parent engagement, KCB, community involvement in decisions, which is, you know, pretty strong policy that already says, I'm going to pull it up, says the school committee endorses the concept that community participation in the affairs of the schools is essential if the school system and the community are to maintain mutual confidence and respect and work together to improve the quality of education. All citizens will be encouraged to express ideas, concerns, and/or questions about the schools to the school administration, to any appointed advisory bodies, and to the committee. Residents who are especially qualified will be tapped, basically, and the committee and staff will give substantial weight to the advice they receive from individual community groups interested in the schools. So there's already an expectation here. The idea is that
That's our, I'm sorry, I hate to cut you off.
yeah,
That's our policy already?
that piece, but it's not connected to anything to do with these long-term field trips. It's called community involvement in decision making.
And, wow,
What policy number
I
is
feel
that?
embarrassed not to know
KCB.
that. KCB.
Endorses the concept that community participation in the affairs of the schools is essential if the school system and the community are to maintain.
Have we adopted that policy, KCB?
It's here in our,
Policy manual?
No, it's in the MASC, right?
in the MASC.
But that doesn't mean we've adopted it.
No, let's see, where do I find this?
I don't remember seeing that policy.
Maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. Where is
Relevant
that?
to field trips, because we've pulled field trip ones a number of times. That doesn't mean we can't adopt it.
Yeah, this is not in the field trip.
No, I understood you to say it was a standalone policy.
Yeah,
It was
No, it's an
about community
MASC
involvement.
policy, but we haven't adopted it.
I'm checking our policy manual.
Well, that's the question.
No, we
I'm checking the policy manual, I don't know, off the top of my head.
okay.
KCB, community involvement in decision making. Roland Boylston.
Is it in there?
Yep.
So it's in our policy manual.
Yep.
Well,
It is.
So, I mean, the whole
Hold on
idea
a second.
the whole idea
Can you
behind,
read it again?
yeah. The school committee endorses the concept that community participation in the affairs of the schools is essential if the school system and the community are to maintain mutual confidence and respect and work together to improve the quality of education for students. It therefore intends to exert every effort to identify the desires of the community and to be responsive through its actions to those desires. All citizens will be encouraged to express ideas, concerns, and/or questions about the schools to the school administration, to any appointed advisory bodies, and to the committee. Residents who are specially qualified because of interest, training, experience, or personal characteristics will be encouraged to assume an active role in school affairs. From time to time, these people may be invited by the committee to act as advisors, either individually or in groups. The committee and the staff will give substantial weight to the advice they receive from individuals and community groups interested in the schools, particularly from those individuals and groups they have invited to advise them regarding specific problems, but will use their best judgment in arriving at decisions.
I would really like to see that the policy subcommittee draws the full committee's attention to that policy, and that they may not know or have read that it exists, because it is a policy they should be aware of.
Well, okay, and so how does it relate to field trips?
Well, that's what I'm trying to,
So I'm wondering if somehow a reference to that policy, I'm thinking out loud now, I don't have this fully developed in my head, but if we're suggesting, assuming we go with the idea of a legacy field trip, assuming that that is something we agree to as a committee, that when planning for an end to a legacy field trip, for example, or
A change,
right, that we reference policy
right?
blah blah blah, that should guide the way school personnel think about that process. I'm really just doing something, I'm not being articulate, but quite frankly, I am embarrassed not to know that policy was there.
So, hang on. So what I'm,
That would be a simpler, that would be, there's a lot of good work in here and a lot of detail. But I think that what has been driving the conversation is the process that was or wasn't used
right, that's
in
the,
making the decision.
right.
And that policy, without giving you
Suggests
a
the
how-to
process.
manual, gives you the umbrella under which you make that decision.
It does.
I
What
don't
it-
think it's something we don't do. I mean, we have lots of times we invite. the
Well,
community.
I'm not suggesting that it never happens, but I'm focusing on the particular field trip and the decisions that were made around that. I'm not sure they were, I'm not sure that policy governed that or informed that.
Yeah, so I think what this piece doesn't do in relation to field trips, in my view, is it doesn't reference giving time.
Exactly.
Time for managing a change is how I'm thinking. It's that, like, you could, and they probably did in this last case as one example, give opportunities for input, but at the last minute. It wasn't way out front.
Wasn't front-loaded.
Right.
Why won't you just, it's because, see, there's a piece in yours that I like, and it was just that part, right here. This timeline,
Yeah,
a planful timeline. Ensure schools pursue a planful timeline for change to engage students and family. I like that part, but I would think you could, maybe that could be added as an amendment to the other policy,
yes.
to
So
KCB.
I mean,
Could you make me a copy of that? Not right now, but for
Yep.
tomorrow. I'm gonna give it to the parents.
Yep.
I think that this could be modified to say something akin to, I don't think I can read my own chicken scratch, but these, okay, hang on. You know, that I like your language, Cliff, about this policy should guide the way the school personnel engage the community when field
said it better than I
legacy
did.
trips are
Thank
being changed. And then we can say the superintendent shall establish procedures and keep that line. We can take out the piece about the data just because it raises red flags, but to me, that was put there in order to support conversations. So if your procedures have something in it that say, you need to come with information about why the changes are being made, if they're being made for instructional reasons or, because participation is declining, you need to come with information about that. But I put it here because I felt like if you're going to have, this last case is instructive to me. People wanted that information. They wanted accurate information. And so it feels to me like we use data in every other piece of decision-making in the school district. That's part of the standards, that people know how to analyze that data, make decisions off that data. I don't know why this would be any different, to have that expectation that they're making evidence-based decisions and can share that and describe that with.
I think in this
community.
specific case, the one in that field trip that just went by, that I think the issue was, one was the timeliness of it, but I think it was just the dispute over which data set was accurate.
That was one piece.
Yeah, but I think the timeliness was more the case. That I think the parents felt that it was just too sudden to have happened.
Right,
that way.
and they weren't solicited in giving any feedback.
Yeah, I think it was more of a
process.
procedural thing that they had more of an issue with it. One is a dispute about the accuracy of the data, but also, there was a procedural piece that I think they took an exception with.
So there's two parts to the field trip policy arena. There's the generic policy about field trips, because the school committee doesn't get involved in individual field trips. That's like
A day's field trip.
This is what a school committee thinks should be considered when developing any field trip in the district. Both the ones that we have no jurisdiction over and the ones that we have specific approval for. And then there's a separate set of a separate set of policies that refer specifically to field trips that have to come to us because they're overnight or out of state. The way the original policy is written, it doesn't really separate those two groups out. Those are two pots, There's the generic pot that's really more geared towards we're taking the kindergarten to the farm today.
Right.
But the ones that take kids out of the state or overnight, that's another set. So I think it's appropriate to have a different set or higher set of expectations for the more complex trips, which go out of state or overnight and those kinds of things. And a little bit of me has a negative reaction to the teacher's response, in that the tone is that, people aren't just going to do field trips anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not what they said, but that's the tone. No one on the school committee would be saying that.
No.
School committee members are saying, for these, I don't want to use the word legacy, for these overnights and out-of-state trips that have more consequence in planning, time, expense, etc., there should be a higher standard or a different standard a different set of policies for that.
So you're talking about trips not even up to the sort of legacy
Right.
place.
Yes.
Any multi-day trip you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Because it's a bigger investment in energy, time, planning. And that doesn't mean that the standards would be radically different from this, but there might be some additional looks.
We're talking about a multi-day overnight trip, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, that's so that would be in the jurisdiction of the school committee.
Yes, because those are the ones who come to us.
Yeah.
So you would expect that we would have clearer policy on that because of we get to see them. And I certainly wouldn't want the result to be that, teachers would make the choice not to do those kinds of trips because they have a school committee that's actually going to ask them questions. That I would hope that would not be the case.
But are you proposing that the policy or process for any multi-day trip be, because we don't have this now. What
No, we
have
do
right
not have
now
this
is
now. We do not have this
generic,
now.
and then we have legacy. Are you proposing something in the middle?
Perhaps. I just think that when you look at the bulk of field trips, we never see them. And we don't know how they're planned. We don't know what the communication is with parents. And there's no way we should know that. That's just, that would be overreach on our part. But when we're confronted with these more complex trips, perhaps we should have a slightly higher standard.
Well,
I don't know what MASC says about that. Maybe they have nothing to say about it. I do not know.
I'm not sure what you're thinking of when you say a higher standard, but we do already have a different process because they have to fill out a whole. Is the field trip form different for these trips that come to us?
No,
No, they're the same as for just a day trip.
Yeah.
The only difference is the school committee chair signs after the vote. He signs the approval on
Okay.
the overnight or out of state,
So.
and just the superintendent signs the others.
So the
And
difference
the
is-
organizers for the trip actually come and address the school
Most of the time,
committee.
yeah.
Yeah.
That at least should be a baseline standard that they do come.
And field
Not
questions.
always do they come.
Yeah.
Well, I know like the student council trip, that's like an overnight to the Cape. They don't normally come to present
But
anything.
perhaps, I'm
But-
just suggesting that perhaps it should be.
So most of the time, yeah, they do, but.
I don't
Okay.
know. I'm not sure about that, but I probably should have not said all this. It
So-
has occurred to me.
So one possibility is to say that any multi-day trip, the organizers, whoever's signing off on being the supervising organizer, needs to come to the school committee and present the trip and address any questions the committee may have.
I think that's a minimal standard for a school committee that has to approve it. I think when, I don't want people who, and people do come and present their meetings, their
Right.
field trips. And I wouldn't want the teachers who are doing the presentation to feel like, that the questions the committee ask are designed to make their life difficult. I think I would like them to think that we're asking questions because we don't understand or we really want to know about.
Yeah, I would even phrase it as we're asking questions in order so we can stand firmly behind
Yeah,
the
and
trip.
support the trip.
And support the trip.
So
yeah.
what would happen? What would happen if there's a field trip and well, we just saw what happens, I guess. The teachers just say, we don't want to go on it anymore.
Right.
I know we've been doing it for 9 years, we don't want to go on it anymore.
They have every right to do that.
Yeah.
So if they have the right to do that, though, why then, if you have a policy that someone doesn't have to adhere to,
No, they do. I mean, the policy is about managing the change process, not whether they go on a trip or not.
Yeah, but doesn't, oh, wait a minute.
So, I think I try to say here that there are any number of reasons why a trip may be changed or a trip may be discontinued or be interrupted over a series of years. And those are all legitimate reasons, whether they're curricular, instructional, or personal. So that's not up to us.
No.
What's up to us, in my view, is that we have a policy that says that whenever a change is being made to a long-term field trip where the community has become expectant of those trips because it's a tradition, or they've invested prior years in that trip, that there be a thoughtful timeline for change and engagement processes that allow people advanced opportunities to learn about why the changes are taking place and to offer suggestions or support for what the changes might look like.
So, when you say the committee expects faculty and administrators to regularly evaluate,
That's also policy we have. That came right out of the language having to do with instruction.
That already exists.
That already exists. Let me see if I can find that. Be curriculum development. Constant adaptation.
IGA.
Yep.
the
Constant
reg-
adaptation and development of the curriculum is necessary if the district is to meet the needs of the students in its schools. To be successful, curriculum development must be a collaborative enterprise involving staff and administrators utilizing their professional expertise and gathering input from parents and community. The committee expects its faculty and administration to regularly evaluate the education program and to recommend modifications of practice and changes in curriculum content, as well as the addition or deletion of courses to the instructional program.
So there's two policies that already inform this decision. This one and the KCB policy. Am I right about that?
Yes, and I think there's.
There may even be another one.
Even a third. About, I'm trying to see if I can find it, though I don't want to say it until I make sure I have it.
Fair enough. It's a very complex problem.
Maybe it was IGA, that basically curriculum development is it involves staff and administrators with their professional decision-making and then getting input from others. But the curriculum decisions rest with staff and administration.
The cross-reference on field trips says JJH student travel. I don't know off the top of my head.
I want to say that's the one that says overnight, the I think it's the overnight.
Student travel,
Overnight.
JJH.
Well, at the bottom of the field trip policy, it says cross-reference JJH student travel.
I think that's the one that says what the times the students are allowed to travel that night.
Yes, that's right. And final
we just looked
approval will not be granted until all preparations for the trip have been completed, which is not how we do it, right? Aren't we normally approving things before things are all completed?
No. No, because it's on the sheet. It's on all that information is on the sheet.
application.
So they
Yeah,
have
but there are
everything.
often things on the sheet that are like still to be done.
Yeah, so you'll approve it if it says, transportation company to be determined, something like that.
Exactly,
But,
yeah.
but it's on there. You could easily say, well, we're not gonna approve it till it's
Yeah.
done. But it's usually just one company or another, or they're waiting for a final price to come in or something like that.
So, to go back to this, feedback for a minute. Can we go back to this
Sure.
list? Because, the second bullet,
You wanna just take the bullets one by one?
well, I mean, the first bullet, I'm not exactly sure, what to say.
Yeah, they're just curious about how it came up.
Yeah,
Did
well,
you-
I don't know, is that what they mean, how it came up? That's because of
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
this case, that's why it came up.
No, the definition.
The definition, because, let me just see, I think, I tried to say something about it, I could.
Who came up with 8 years? Is it arbitrary? I think
No,
that's it.
we talked
did
about
it
it
in
here.
the policy subcommittee,
Okay.
so that's the answer to that question.
We talked about sort of generationally, how long does it take for a family to have multiple children go through an experience and come to expect it?
And we don't have data to support that that's a right number.
No, it was a reasoned definition. The second one, I would say this is incorrect. The policy's intent is not to encourage trips. That's not the intent of the policy. The intent of the policy is to ensure that, because with legacy trips, both educators and the community become heavily invested in the trip, it's in managing the change process. The intent is to lay out some guidelines for managing a change process when multiple parties have a deep investment in a trip.
Managing the change process.
The conducting, as I said before, the conducting surveys data collection is a suggestion. It's not required in the policy, the way it's framed. So I can't say that I understand the third bullet. The policy acknowledges teachers are not obligated to plan such trips, yet there's a timeline for change. To me, those are two different things. Planning the trips, as I've said before, and making changes to the trips, discontinuing the trips, that is not in our domain. That's a staff decision, a school decision. But the timeline for change, when a trip is being changed, is, to me, a necessary component because there are multiple players invested in that trip. It's not that anybody else gets to determine whether a trip is changed, but how it's changed, the process for making the change. So I see those as two different things. So, if a set group of teachers provides students with a field trip for a number of years, a non-obligated teacher should at any time be able to no longer wish to participate. I mean, this is, I guess I don't know, can somebody restate what number 3 is trying to say? I'm not following what the point is there.
I think their point is they're trying to find out if any field trip less than 8 years, whether any of this applies.
Well, I think they're saying that whether it's less than 8 years or greater than 8 years, if a teacher doesn't want to participate in the trip anymore, they should not have to do that.
That's established.
Well, I think that's what that says there.
Yeah, there's no question about that, I don't think. I think I said that even in the draft policy, that there are lots of reasons why a trip might get changed or ended. The fourth bullet, we can easily take the word legitimately out. This seems to be the problem. It can stand, the reason legitimately was in there was as a reminder to the community, the parent community, that it's a legitimate reason for teachers and they say it can, makes it sound like it can be challenged. Well, the community may well challenge. They may think that the teacher doesn't have the right to just, on their own, say they can't do a trip. So I put it in there as emphasis that it is legitimate, but it doesn't have to be there. We can take the word out, and the sentence stands fine without it. Teachers may choose not to participate in legacy field trips for personal reasons. Right? This one about reimbursement, stipend for the lead teacher, there are a couple things here. It says, in the second sentence there, it says, expecting a teacher to go on overnight trips with no compensation. We don't expect teachers to go on overnight trips.
No, and they don't either.
I mean, I said it in the draft that there isn't,
There is no
it's
expectation.
above and beyond their, so the expectation is not relevant here. What I said in the draft was that, what I was proposing here was a stipend, lead teachers, those officially submitting field trip approval requests and named as supervising the overall trip shall receive a stipend to acknowledge the extra time and responsibility involved in supervising. So, yes, anybody who goes on the trip is going above and beyond. If we could pay them all stipends, I would say great. But I don't know, financially, whether that's something that's tenable. So what I'm proposing is that at least the person who's taking the responsibility for oversight and planning and, coming to the school committee to explain their stuff and taking the responsibility for making sure it all works should at least be acknowledged with the stipend. To me, currently, nobody gets us money for any of this, correct?
No, they do.
They do.
For this trip, for the Nature's Classroom trip, they do.
The teachers who go on the trip
The ones that stay overnight.
are paid.
I don't know,
And that's in their contract.
I'm not sure if it is or not.
Because
Why would they be paid?
I find these items here at the end particularly to be contractual things.
I don't know if it is or not.
They sound like.
But I know that for this trip they do. And I only know that because it came up during the discussion that they do get some stipends.
Why would they be paid for this trip and not for going to Washington DC?
I don't know that they're not. I don't know that they're not. I just know that on this trip they are. I don't know for
Okay,
sure
well,
that
I would definitely need to know more about that to think about this item. All right, I thought they were not paid anything. No one was paid anything.
No, it's my understanding that for the Nature's Classroom trip specifically, that only because it came up in a conversation. I didn't think anybody got paid a stipend for any of them, but which is not a good assumption on my part. But
Yeah, but it also raises questions of why would some teachers be paid stipends for a trip, a multi-day trip, and not others for a different trip?
And I'm assuming that for overnight trips they do.
Okay, can we find out about that? Both for this specific trip and for any multi-day
And one would
trip.
assume it's
And
a
whether it's-
contractual
Yeah, whether it's in the,
obligation.
I don't remember seeing
I
that in
remember
the
seeing it, but it could be
contract.
in there. It could be in there.
All
Do you
right.
think it's in there, Cliff?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay, so we'll get more info.
Because it definitely sounds like something that a teacher's union would have negotiated.
Well, and also the language in the response sort of sounds like,
Yeah.
we're taking,
Yeah.
why would we do it if we weren't paid?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Okay, so we don't have to answer that probably at this moment unless it's very fast. Language around evaluation. So I wondered about this. This sounds to me, this response made me feel like, okay, I guess this is new, that people have not felt that they're at liberty to say they're not going on a trip. this year for any kind of personal reason. And that there could be repercussions if suddenly, maybe a whole lot of teachers said, I'm not doing these trips anymore. Or one teacher.
I don't think that happened.
So,
That also sounds like
Just the
contractual
stuff, just the stuff
language.
about the language, yeah. I don't think that, I mean, I think that, I don't think it's ever been in any policy, but I don't think it's ever happened. Not with this principal, maybe another principal in the past or along the line, or somebody thought.
And when I
that
say it
somebody
sounds
would
like a
say it.
contractual obligation, is that the contract covers wages and working conditions, and that would be a working condition. So there must be some language about,
well, and why?
See, I wouldn't think that it'd be in here because field trips are, they're not contractual, so it wouldn't be in here, I wouldn't think.
Jeff,
Unless
could
it
it
was like-
possibly be in the back with the stipend appendix?
Yeah, it could be there, because I don't think it'd be in this language, because they're not contractual, so why would,
Right.
if they were contractual, they'd have to go on them,
Yeah, right.
so that's why, but it could be back here.
And then the other thing, as I felt when I was reading this, is why would this addendum trigger this feeling of possible threat or repercussions in the evaluation process?
no idea.
My guess is probably just the tone of the way this whole thing went.
People are feeling threatened in this particular case. They came
I
up.
would think that. I think that's what I'm not sure, but I would think that would be it.
So, my feeling is about this is that whether a trip happens or not should never, obviously, in my view, have any bearing on an evaluation. What could have bearing on an evaluation is how effectively a teacher managed the change process, how effectively that person communicated with parents or involved parents in the decision-making, recognized their role in being heard in the community. That's parent engagement, family engagement is one of the standards that teachers are evaluated on. So that whole change process could reflect in the evaluation, but not the decision whether to have a trip. And I mean, I can add that language in. It sort of felt inappropriate here.
What language do you want to add in to say?
Well, they said we would like some language around evaluation.
I really don't see the need for that.
You can't. I don't think you can,
No.
because you don't evaluate teachers.
That's right.
That's a.
What do you mean? Oh, we don't.
You
No,
don't
we
evaluate
don't.
teachers.
Right.
So if that's something to.
We're not talking about
whether
evaluation.
And this is a school committee policy, not the administrator's policy, so.
It says teachers should not feel as though opting out of a trip that they no longer feel benefits their students or cannot attend for personal reasons could affect their evaluation. I agree, but I'm not sure why that would show here, I guess. It feels out of place. I don't know is there some other place where that kind of thing gets stated?
Teacher evaluation is not in our purview.
I think they're probably referring to like some kind of retaliatory action. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure people are fearful to say, I don't want to go on that trip, for example. For whatever reason, I want to be home with my family at night. But they feel, we've all said that, when you've walked in and you've inherited a legacy field trip and you're
Yeah.
expected to go,
Yeah.
and you feel this big pressure to go, but they actually have the right to say, I'm not going to go. But they feel like that's potentially going to get them in hot water. And I don't know where that gets addressed. It doesn't feel like it gets addressed here, but I don't know where else it can get addressed. But maybe what's happening here is that we're elevating this notion that teachers can say no.
Yeah, I mean, You know, I gotta tell you, I think we're overthinking a lot of this. I mean, you know, like I just looked, there's nothing in here about stipends, which of course it wouldn't because field trips aren't contractual. So that means, because those stipends are contractual, so that wouldn't be there. So my guess is that it's just something that developed over time. The teachers said, we're gonna go overnight. Can we get compensated for this? And those are just things that happens, and
Well, we need to know if that's across the board, teachers are getting this, or whether this is something that evolved out of Nature's Classroom.
yeah. Put that down.
I guess obviously, our intent is not to take away any payments that teachers already receive. So we can't, advocate here for there being a stipend if there's already a stipend in place. I don't know what the policy, if there's, that's just, how is that decided? There's no policy about this, so I don't know what to say. So we need more information, I guess. So it seems to me the evaluation piece is something that we can't really address in this policy because it's not in our purview. But I understand the sentiment, but it's no way.
What is it should be some points?
So they're proposing a hypothetical. If a legacy trip's in place and there are no teachers who want to go 1 year, how will this policy treat that circumstance?
Policy doesn't deal with that. That's a building-based problem. That's not our problem.
No, but it is.
But it just happened.
No, this is.
It's not our problem unless it's brought to our attention by the public, so.
But this does fall under this policy. Because it says.
If no teachers want to go on a particular field trip that's been in place,
then the trip doesn't happen.
the trip doesn't happen.
Right.
And that
That's
happens
part
at
of.
the building level.
But that's what this says here. Trips may be interrupted, they may be ended for curricular, instructional, or personal reasons. That's what it is. So the way this policy frames that is, so it's ended. So what that does is it means there has to be a managed change process. That's what this policy says.
Manage how, yes.
That, back to that line that you said you liked. There needs to be, they need to follow some superintendent's guidelines around how to manage the process at that point. If the trip's not happening and it's a legacy trip, then you have to get in front of it and manage that process properly.
Yeah, but I think it sounds like more of a procedural thing than something that.
That is a
Well,
procedural thing, because that's how it's framed. It says the superintendent shall establish district procedures to ensure schools pursue a planful timeline
Yeah,
for change, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, I like that line.
Yeah, so that's the answer to that bullet.
But I think it almost seems like it would, like I said, I think it would, that line would be better added to the other policy. The community.
But this is about field trips.
Yeah, maybe I'm
so-
just putting it in there because it's, because of the community involvement with this field trip.
I mean, I think what we were suggesting here a minute ago in conversation is that we cite that other policy here, and we say, based on that policy, because families have become invested in this legacy trip through tradition, that the expectation is the community will be involved in that as per policy KCB, and the superintendent shall establish district procedures to frame that.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that piece, because I think with that, I think that's the thing I think that's what
that
was
we didn't
missing.
have, yeah.
That there wasn't a set of procedures to,
Right.
but I think that's really the essence of what needs to be added here, not all of the, you know what I mean? And it's not that it's not that it's not true, it's just that it seems like we could condense it into something just around an expectation that the superintendent, so the school committee expects that the superintendent will direct the schools to have a procedure around a timely change process, which makes perfect sense, because that's what I think this all stemmed from that. But I think that's it.
And you're
I
the
think
only
that's-
person we can tell what to do anyways.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, and I think that's, you know, as I think about it, I think that's really all of it.
Well,
I
so,
mean, they have a lot of stuff here that they pulled from that, whether they saw something that was there or not, but I think the essence of that, like you said, is just managing the change process. So maybe wherever it gets added, if it gets added to this, an addendum to this policy, or just gets added into that policy as a,
I think it could be added in.
yeah,
I
as
mean,
a,
that's what this was intended to be.
Yeah, I think it could be
It's a
added in.
new section to this field trip policy.
Yes.
yeah.
But you're saying to condense this centerpiece, get this,
Yeah, I
get
think
this
it's-
up.
Yeah, I think all needs to, like, when I read that, though, the thing that struck me is this piece down here about there just needs to be a process. When I think about this field trip and more specifically, that's the root of the problem. You
Okay,
know,
so-
even if the parents question the data, had there been a timeline for, you know, if there had been a process in place, then the discussion would have happened, there wouldn't have been that urgency to it that there was, because there would have been a timeline in place. We have to, they said, well, we question this data. Okay, well, now we have time to bring in the people from Nature's Classroom. So it just gives you more time to do that. We
Right.
just got so crunched.
So, are you suggesting that, okay, let me back up into the middle sections. The stipend is the second paragraph.
I would avoid, I think at this point, I think this has been a great conversation, but I would avoid talking about stipends. I would focus on thinking back to what happened. If there's one message I think as a committee we know everyone would agree to, is that there was not adequate planning for changing that trip. And that was the primary issue. And that if we could get language in this policy that addresses that issue, that would go a long way to making this policy better. And I think the reference to policy KCB and the reference that the superintendent will put in place a procedure, I think that's really,
I would keep
that's the nut of what happened.
I would keep the stipend out of it too. Now, here's the thing about that. In the next contract negotiation, if that's something either the committee wants to bring up, then it can be put in and negotiated, because it would have to be negotiated.
Okay.
So it either have to be done now as an MOU, and I don't think anybody wants to do that
No,
right
I don't
now.
think anyone wants to do that.
Or it could be something that if the committee thought
Okay.
2 years down the road, this is something we feel strongly about, we can add it in, or not, or the teachers might bring it up too.
I mean, the only reason I brought it up in the first place was because I thought no one was paid anything. But what I'm hearing is, which didn't seem right to me.
I did get an answer from Bob on that, who gets paid. To his knowledge, no one gets a stipend. For example, I don't think they're getting paid for the Philadelphia trip that they're going on.
All right.
And that's an
wrong.
overnight trip. However, I think Nature's Classroom teachers had received them in the past. I don't know how that came about, nor where it is documented. It may be listed in an old teacher's contract somewhere other than a stipend appendix, or it may have been on a separate MOU. So it's not a standard thing that they get a stipend if they go on an overnight trip. It happened for Nature's Classroom at some point in the past. But it's not in a contract.
So it could have been something that wasn't a contract. They've been going on this trip for a while, it could have been something in a previous contract that they negotiated.
Yeah.
That didn't get carried over.
And he said, or it may have been on a separate MOU, but it's not something that's in.
Okay, so I was right then.
So
I
you-
was-
So there's nothing in place right now,
There's
as far
nothing
as
in
we
place.
know. Okay.
Right, and they're not staying over this year, so that, there won't be any this year either. It was, if it happened at all, which obviously it did, it happened only because of the overnight piece, which they're not doing
Right.
this year.
All right, okay. So we're gonna drop that piece, and if people want to pursue that, it would come up in the next contract.
It'd be a
negotiation.
contract
Right,
conversation.
yeah, okay.
I think I would be happy with the strong language about the planning for change.
Yeah, because I think it needs to be done, so I think that part,
Because when I think clearly, or I try to focus on what was the core of the problem for this particular trip, was that.
Well, let me ask about the
Yeah.
other paragraph here, which had to do with participation, which we talked about at a previous meeting. Do these trips have to meet some kind of threshold for participation?
That was a question.
For the reasons that you've said before, Cliff, about these being sort of above and beyond
Yes.
what a normal trip would involve, I like having a participation rate in there. And I don't think it should vary from trip to trip or year to year.
No, I agree. I think if we're going to have it, it should be consistent. Perhaps that's a topic that requires broader consultation with
Well-
administration and teachers association.
I mean, we can also say the superintendent will determine a participation rate that will apply to all. We
In
cannot say here.
consultation with,
Yeah.
Wendy also answered that question. She said, we have paid stipends for Nature's Classroom in the past. It was $100 per night. But she doesn't know off the top of her head how it came about or what the documentation was, but she does have records of it. She have to go back and pull them, but.
that's my guess. It was probably something that was in an older contract, and that it got carried over, but it got pulled out somewhere along the line.
someone overlooked it.
Well, my guess is it would have had to be negotiated for it to happen at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, we don't write out checks to people because we feel like it. It has to be somewhere.
So, sorry, to back up.
No, no,
Still-
no, no,
my
no,
head's
no,
still
no,
on the
no, no,
participation
no.
rate. If the superintendent were to determine that rate, would it apply to all multi-day trips, all extended trips, all trips, or all legacy trips?
Good question.
I mean, I don't see here a difference between legacy trip and a multi-day. Multi-day trip to me would be the level, including legacy trips. If you're going to go away for 2, 3, 4 days, you should be going with a high percentage of students in that group.
Because it's part of their curriculum.
Right.
But the superintendent would be the one who would
Sets the rate.
work with people to set the rate. And then if they were 5 percentage points short, they could say to him, look, we're 5 percentage points short because blah, blah, blah. And if it made sense, he'd say, all right, go ahead. It would be at the discretion of the superintendent. The school committee is interested in the largest percentage of students participating.
Well, I know there was some question, I think the principals had set a field trip rate for the 5th grade field trip this year. And, which I don't know if they're gonna hit that rate or not.
Yeah, so what
They're going, period.
for the Nature's Classroom you're talking?
They can have 3 people, they're going.
Yeah,
The fifth
we're
grade or
not,
the
we're
sixth
not,
grade, which one?
Both of them. I don't care if there's more teachers than kids. Keep going.
we're definitely, this was definitely not applied to Nature's Classroom this year. But it could apply to Nature's Classroom next year.
You know, in my experience as a principal, also as a teacher, there, you know, no matter what the size of the school, there always were 1, 2, or 3 kids, never more than that. But it was always enough of a block of kids that you actually had to plan something, and yet it was only 3 kids, you know, and like staffing that was like a challenge.
Yeah.
But even in Sudbury, we had I always had 1, 2, or 3 kids who did not go.
And I think this year that would make sense for that not to apply because it's
No,
been,
it won't this
especially in the
year.
5th grade, it's been sort of rushed and they've done a great job putting it together, but it's really been,
Yeah.
you know, sort of, let's get this together. So
Yeah.
So this,
there may be some kids who haven't been able to plan in their head that they're ready to go.
Well,
you
sure,
know.
it hasn't been an expectation
Yeah.
coming up through the ranks.
Yeah.
can you support a piece in here saying that the superintendent, in consultation with administration, will determine a participation rate for all multi-day trips, and that because it's part of the curriculum and we want the highest numbers to go as possible, but the approval for each trip is at your discretion.
Can we put that in the next leadership meeting? I'll take it up
Yeah.
next month.
I'll try to get your draft, the
Okay.
language.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, and then we would try to condense some of this. So let me take another pass.
Whack at it.
Yep, another pass based on this discussion and see if we can,
I want to say that I think it's been a very good discussion. And a lot of layers have been peeled and then sealed back up and unpeeled again. And
yeah.
I think
Yeah. Well, I think it's a reasonable expectation for the school committee to say that you expect a timely process. How, whatever that process is not for you to determine, but to expect that
Exactly.
there is a process.
And
I
that
think
it,
it's a
that
reasonable
it
expectation, and there's not
reflect the
one.
other policies that we have around community engagement.
yes.
Right. Christie, could you put that on also for next month, just the procedure for
Because we have 2 great,
time limit changing?
we had, 2 great
Time will change
policies to
process
reference.
for
Policy
no field
IGA,
trips.
policy KCB.
Okay, now we're closing in on 2 hours here. I'm wondering if, this is a quick item, whether MASC recommended removal of 4 policies.
Where's my,
That are deemed redundant or unnecessary.
yes, they did. That was in the policy newsletter, the last
Right.
policy newsletter.
IAHA, Basic Instructional Program, Student Insurance Program, Guidance Program, Student Gifts and Solicitation.
Yes, those were all in the last policy update, recommended to be removed as they were redundant.
Student gift and solicitations.
Yeah, I know, I
What
wondered
is
that.
that? Seems like it should have been taken out 30 years ago.
It says, redundant,
100.
MASC staff have found the following policies to be redundant or unnecessary, and we have removed them from our reference manual. So
Then-
shall we recommend the removal of those for?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's stop there. And Christie, pick up these,
Yep.
these regional efforts on the next meeting. And why don't we set that next?
Are they complicated? I just
No, they're really not complicated.
Juice, you want to?
Oh,
I
About
mean,
5
we have-
minutes.
I haven't eaten since 7:30 this morning. It's not going to matter in another hour. I mean, at this point.
They're pretty much, these are pretty much straightforward. They were like almost duplicates for the elementary and Tohoto, and I just kind of
Oh,
made them into one.
This is a result of regionalization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have like a little synopsis of each one?
They're in our drive.
There's the 3 policies. So you have the 2 originals, and then the 3rd one is the regional proposed, and any changes I made are in red.
Where did it go?
Is JICC a new one?
JICC is not a new one, but I talked to Dorothy about that, and she said that is a reiteration of one of these ones that are in here, EEA. She said what happened was before we had the ability to search the online policy manual, they put it in two places. So JICC and EEA are virtually the same policy, it's just in two places. So she felt like JICC could be removed.
Oh, removed.
Remove, oh,
Yes.
okay.
Because it's not on the list for removal, right?
No, that was not in the policy newsletter. This was something else I came upon.
Okay, let's put JICC up with those other
Okay.
removals.
That was on Dorothy's recommendation.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah, because it's the only one who sits in that group there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so EC, EA, EA, EC, and JE are all, those are all policies you condensed? from
Yes, I mean, they were
regionalization?
basically carbon copies, but they were just the elementary and just Tohoto, so I kind of just, added to make it.
And these are the buildings and grounds management?
Mm-hmm.
I did not get a chance to look at these. Whoops. This is too
Well, EC, policy EC, the proposed one, only has a small change.
EC. What is this? Let me see.
Adding the word individual and an S on schools.
That's it.
That sounds
They were carbon
non-controversial
copies.
to me.
Why can't I see where EC is? I don't see it on my
There's a
list.
folder called EC.
In our shared drive?
Yes,
For
yes.
to policy subcommittee?
Yes.
I just have a long list of documents.
Usually I'm the one who can't find my way around.
Refresh,
Susan,
try
this
to
is
refresh.
amazing.
I hate that refresh feature on this. It's nuts. Oh, look at,
Yeah.
That's generally how I feel, Susan. Like when I find it, I go,
Susan's gonna get a
"Oh."
little more technologically savvy. She can come, I'll give her some help with it.
Oh, God.
all right, so EC, bring that forward.
Yeah.
EEA, EEA.
Oops. Making it hard.
You've been changing the titles on all of these to reflect all
To
the
per-
schools?
Yes, I've taken out the B, E, B, O, and T. And if you notice, I put up in the right-hand side or wherever the name of the policy is, I put proposed, regional proposed, or proposed
Yeah.
regional, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, in the title of the actual document, I see you here, and Tohoto Regional Middle School.
Yep, yep.
So you wouldn't just say, oh, have you been doing that on all of them? I thought maybe it just said Berlin-Boylston Regional School District or something.
Depends on how it was worded. I can change it to,
Just that'd be good to be consistent, but.
If it's a regional policy, then rather than naming the schools.
Yep.
No, I guess I want to rephrase that. As long as the policy applies to all three schools, then it should say Berlin-Boylston Regional School District, I would say.
Do you see what I'm referring to? The titling of the policy?
yes, instead of saying Berlin-Boylston
Yeah,
Regional
yeah.
School District, yeah.
Okay. All right, EEA, EC. Oh, this is, let's see.
Proposed EAs.
Oh, this one has more.
Oh my gosh. I just knocked myself out of it. Da, 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 da.
Wendy just sent me a copy of the contract. There was a contract last year for Nature's Classroom.
Huh.
Yeah,
And
there would be a contract.
Oh,
it
with
just
Nature's
says
Classroom.
no for the teach. This is an example for a particular teacher. As approved outdoor education program, you shall be compensated $100 per day, up to a maximum of $600. This year's trip will be scheduled for 4 days. Compensation will be $400. And the teacher signed it and sent it in, and Wendy paid a
Is
stipend.
it signed by the school committee? Is it an
Yeah,
MOU?
who signed?
No.
Who official signed it at the bottom besides the teacher?
Nobody.
What's the heading on the document?
Contract for grade 6 team, Nature's Classroom, June 11,
Again,
12, 13,
you know what
14.
it could have been that was part of a teacher's contract at one time, and it's lived on as that. I bet any money,
Okay, you get something to clean up here.
because you would have never, that would have never.
Okay.
Well, with no central office signature or school committee signature on it, how is it lawful?
Oh, it's an overnight trip, you tell me. The school committee's in charge, man. We
Oh!
gotta look into this. We gotta look
Signature's not
into
on
this.
there.
Who was on the school committee when that was signed, when that was put forth?
Oh, I'm sure I was on it. I've been on
Alright.
it forever.
It was last June.
Last June.
And I was the chair.
Yep.
Does it have my signature?
No,
No.
just had the teacher's name and the teacher's signature. That's it.
I'm
gonna submit one. Christy worked really hard today. Give her an extra $1,000. And I'm just gonna sign it, see what
I do have to
happens.
say, Christy, you get some kudos for being able to do research while taking notes
Yeah,
and getting
right.
quick answers, am I right?
And talking to us and fielding my questions,
Yeah.
all coming in
I'm
at
a
one
mom, I
time.
multitask well, yeah.
I'm thinking she's looking at email, but she's already researching.
This, student conduct on school bus.
Does that come
That's
from
JIC,
MASC?
JICC. That's the one that we just said that we're gonna remove per Dorothy, because it was
Oh,
reiterated.
this is removed.
Yes, reiterated in EEA.
I got it. So that's in the removal list?
Yes.
But then there's the okay, never mind. Now I'm lost. Because I
So-
have EEAC, whatever that is, EEAEC.
Oh, yeah, that,
And there's
that's
all
it,
these
yes.
red words in it.
But that's the one
Yeah.
you're saying we're taking out.
JICC should be taken out, because it's
Oh,
reiterated in
JICC is coming out.
EEAEC.
Okay, so I'm reading EEAEC. Okay.
Yes.
All right. And
Yeah,
this,
like,
that's what
make
you
sure
said
I get this
You
right.
said to move it up.
and these changes are
JICC.
based on MASC
You said move
recommendations.
it up, but
Dorothy
the other ones were
specifically.
removed.
Ew.
This,
Oh,
those
yes.
first four removals
just said
was in the
something
newsletter.
different, that's why it
JICC I
confused
came
me.
across when I was trying to combine them. So I
Okay.
asked Dorothy specifically about that, and she said, you can remove JICC.
Those are Dorothy's recommendations for
Yes.
EEAEC.
Yes.
Ones that are in red.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And to go along with that, to remove JICC.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to look at this one for a second because there's so much text in here.
JE was a little more complicated because of the difference in attendance with the high school and the elementary schools, but
So I don't understand this part, because it says, in cases where the child does not conduct himself properly,
On bus or in
that
approaching
there
or
you get
waiting.
a reported in writing, right? And then the next paragraph, it says, for a third offense, what happens to the second offense?
So that is probably a regulation.
it's probably in the
what?
R binder.
Yeah, it's probably in the regulations binder. Because as a principal who used to have to deal with this,
Well, I mean, so why is this even in here? Like, students over the third offense, isn't that a regulation also?
oh, interesting point.
I mean, it seems like when they don't conduct themselves properly, then the bus driver follows the procedure outlined by this superintendent for reporting misconduct.
Well, I can see why it would want to define the third offense as the offense that causes the removal, because that's the red line. But what happens between the first and third
Yeah.
is a internal. I think the school committee sets the policy for when bus privileges are removed, rather than the superintendent.
So,
No, I don't think so, Claire.
But that's what this policy says.
Which one?
the EEAEC.
No, just looking at that.
So it reads, students who repeat their misbehavior on the school bus for a third offense
Will have their.
will
right-
have their riding privileges suspended by the principal. All right, so that is the school committee saying, this is what we want. In such cases, the parents of the student involved become responsible for the son and daughter transportation to the school. You want to see my up close? Here.
Yeah, I don't have the red line version.
There you go.
Yeah, that makes sense, okay.
And that was Dorothy's recommendation. She reviewed that policy.
Yes, we emailed back and forth.
As
Yeah.
outlined in the student handbook. Yeah, because you vote on that, right?
Yeah. Does Dorothy miss me yet?
Okay, so,
Huh.
so,
I'm surprised that's in there. Okay. Better be
is that
safe.
how we
Well, it
operate?
takes the
Yeah,
burden, the burden
it sounds
off
like
the.
That is how we do it,
yeah,
okay.
but I'm
So,
surprised that would be in the policy. That's the surprising part. It sounds like it would be something procedural that,
it
Do
does,
we
yeah.
have other policies regarding buses? Well, do we have other policies around student conduct?
Student
well,
conduct,
you probably, because that's in the student handbook.
Yes.
And
So that's probably why it didn't.
Why it goes under the school committee purview, because it's part of the hand.
Oh,
Yeah, yes, that's the crossover.
Okay.
all right, I'm okay,
Yeah, I'm okay too.
all right, let's move that forward.
Okay.
It's a whole lot of policies. I'm wondering if, okay, that was EA, that's this one.
There's only one left, right?
Yes, the JE.
Attendance. A little more involved.
So maybe we want to postpone this one.
So we're combining 3 schools' attendance policies here.
Yeah.
Maybe we should hold off on that.
I tried.
Let's put that one on the next
Okay.
agenda.
Oy. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried.
Is this
And
an
then-
MASC policy, this one?
JE?
Yeah.
There are current policies that I tried to combine into one regional
But
policy.
it's taken from an MASC policy.
Yeah, at some point, yes.
At some point, yeah.
Yeah.
Might be good to put the
Yeah.
current
Yeah.
one next to this
Yep.
and
I'm surprised
do
at
one
some
more
of these.
comparison.
Yeah.
Hate to say that,
I think that's a great idea.
but since it's, there's a lot here,
A lot of implications.
yeah. Let's do that. I have one other question.
BBRSD administrators follow school committee policies to the letter. Well, I didn't know that.
Thank you for that affirmation.
When the school committee gets this stuff, they get a folder that has all these policies in it. They're not gonna read all those policies, I don't imagine. School committee. I mean, in preparation. I kinda feel like it may be just overwhelming.
Well, I think Angela does.
Maybe, yeah, and they may flip through, it's
Yeah.
how much redlining is there.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, should I be preparing a little synopsis, basically, of what I have to report out?
That
to
wouldn't
put
hurt.
With it, so this, I read this first, so you know what's
They
coming.
do like the
Yep.
Cliff Notes.
Report-
Yeah, right. Policies
Report of the
for
chair.
Dummies.
Yes.
You saying we need Cliff Notes?
Well, I'll tell you, when there's this many policies sitting in that folder.
I know.
It's like, oh. Because are you putting in all of them? The Berlin, the Boylston, the Tohoto, and the proposed?
Yeah. Fun times.
Yeah, they're not gonna wanna, okay, let me see if I can have time to.
A little
Yeah.
probably short in your verbal presentation.
I think what I need, Christie, is to draft something and then give it to you and have you say.
Just double
yeah.
check my notes.
Yeah,
and- Yeah.
make sure it's.
Yeah. Before we go, do we want to set up another meeting
Yes,
while we're here
please.
thinking about it?
Yep, because we need to start doing this whole list of things
Yeah, I
from
know.
MASC.
Well, we got some of them done. We got the
We did,
removals
which is
done.
exciting. All right, let's see.
I know you don't have to write because Christy controls your life.
Yes. Good thing.
He's a lucky guy.
Somebody has to control it.
He sits back. All right, this is March 2nd.
Oh, I sit back, yeah.
We have school committee on, what, 10th?
10th, yeah.
And then a
And
workshop on
24th.
the 24th.
And then our April meeting is the 14th. It's late.
Yep.
But Chris, Cliff, when I interviewed, didn't I tell you that I just can't keep track of myself.
Yes, no.
Oh, all the people that work
The
with me.
people, that- yeah.
So I propose maybe the 30th or the 31st.
I am good on the 30th.
Yep, me too.
That went into a dead
You too.
hole.
30th. Should we do 2
Am I good on the
o'clock?
30th?
Do in the afternoon?
You're good on the
2 o'clock?
30th.
2 o'clock?
Yes.
Or 2:30?
2 works.
2 o'clock we should do, since we've been moving on. Okay. Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn,
Motion made.
seconded?